Hello, 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 everybody. How are you?
Hey, hi Aleyda, how are you doing?
Very good, very good. Thank you. So very happy to be able to be here today, sharing with all of you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. And again, apologies for the time zone problems.
No
It's
worries at all.
typical.
That tends to happen, I'm afraid, indeed. So
Oh,
no
I
worries at all.
bet. Yeah, I was meant to be in France today as well, so I was like completely lost. How have you been though? How was the big move? Because I know you left Brighton early, didn't you, to do that?
Indeed, it finally actually happened already in my new place. Very happy here, and
Perfect.
getting used back again to be able to be settled and also
hmm
retake a little bit also again all online and offline events too.
Yeah, definitely. There's been lots of online and offline events recently. What's been the latest one you've spoken at?
Well, actually, the latest one was SEO meetup, SEO London meetup, XL.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah,
A
yeah.
couple of weeks ago, indeed, and I'm very looking forward to go to the European Search Awards next week too.
Yes, it's going to be very exciting. I will see you there for sure.
Looking forward.
Perfect. Well, we've got a few listeners who've joined us. So, yeah, I guess we can just get started. So, hi everyone, and welcome to our latest Twitter Spaces talk. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Aleyda Solis, where we will be talking about all things SEO reporting, which is a huge topic. So it's obviously a big one, and with more budgets being put into digital marketing by brands of all sizes, knowing where to spend time on reporting, particularly in SEO, and how to best report to clients and also internal stakeholders who should never be forgotten, it is super important. So, Aleyda, we've had a huge number of questions come in for you. I don't know if you've seen all of the hype all over Twitter, lots of people sharing, lots of people really excited for you to be joining us on this spaces. So, if I just dive straight into the first question, are you all good to get started?
Of course, of course. Let's start with it, and I'm very looking forward to answer any questions that people have asked before, or any that you might want to ask at this point too.
Amazing. So, let's start with real basic stuff. Why is reporting in SEO so important?
Reporting at the end of the day is in many processes. I will say most usual SEO processes, a critical phase of it, and an activity that we tend to overlook. And at the end of the day, this activity will end up having a huge impact on decision makers, how we communicate what we have achieved in the SEO processes, if we're
hmm
obtaining the objectives that have been set for the process or not, if everything is
hmm
being effectively implemented as we need, as we had also expected to. So at the end of the day,
hmm
this is what can end up impacting decision makers' assessment of our work. If we have achieved what we had agreed with them, if we are the ones who are to blame or not, right? And then
hmm
also what we can do, and this is the part I think that many of us miss too, what we can do to, let's say, change the status in case things are not moving forward as we expected, right? If the results are not the ones that we initially had set or we expected at that point in the SEO process, how we can change that. And I truly believe that this is a
hmm
part that, I'm afraid, I don't see quite often. So many times it's just like, oh, these are the KPIs. This is what we
Yeah.
have achieved so far, and that's it. Good or bad, that's it. No, no, no. Oh, I recommend that we change this and this and this that is happening right now in order to be able to, get or obtain this other type of results that we are not able
Yeah.
to obtain so far. So it's fundamental. I truly believe that in many occasions, I'm afraid, we end up uh, like with not necessarily happy clients, unhappy clients, and then with broken uh, SEO processes or unsuccessful SEO processes, because we don't necessarily do a good job at this stage of the SEO process in the SEO reporting part. And I believe that that might be also because it's not a very sexy activity. And at the end of the day, I also feel that many agencies and also companies in general, they feel that this takes you off execution, right? So if you're reporting, you're not executing. If you're communicating, you're not doing, right? But it's as important, especially when we need buy-in, when we need approval, when we need support, when we also look for cost, like, let's say, like effectiveness and in what we need or want of the process too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you made a really good point there about accountability too. So looking more along the lines of those recommendations that we're giving, who's holding up that process, who's putting those barriers in place? Is it the stakeholders themselves, or is it a development team, or is it other marketing departments, or even just other departments generally across the business? How can we showcase to them that actually, we're doing our side of things, but maybe we need a little bit more support from them, from their side, in order to get what we need to get done quicker or done more effectively. So yeah, definitely agree with that. Let's talk a little bit about benchmarking. So when we're coming down to our SEO reporting, how can we benchmark our current performance? Are there any particular metrics that we need to be looking at? Are there any particular kind of layouts we need to be considering? Like, how do we benchmark that?
So this depends a lot on the type of KPIs that we want to communicate, that we want to include, right? And at the end of that, this will be very, very tied and connected with the person who will be reading our reports. And of course, if this person is a very business oriented person, a C-level or the CEO or the CMO of the company, they don't need to be actually like minding or worrying about crawlability or indexability, or even many times about rankings benchmark, right? That we all love to include versus the top competitors per country or per product line, right? They want to hear about revenue. They want to hear about ROI. They want many times also to potentially see other things like that, potentially for us as SEOs, like technical people, that many times it won't necessarily makes a lot of sense, but they love to see also, speaking of benchmark, the brand awareness benchmark, and the share of voice for branded queries many times, right? And versus top comparisons. So things that are much more meaningful for them, because these are very tightly connected with what they care about, with those goals that they care about. And what we need to ensure is that what we end up featuring in the report actually reflects that and connect with that and can fulfill their information need about the SEO process. Then on the other hand, of course, we have other more technical stakeholders. So for example, if we are an agency, we will want to report what the head of SEO of the company, or also the product manager, or the people that we're working with from other areas, to let them know how things are going from what they expect. And here again, what it is critical is that we can set KPIs to include in the report that can actually communicate the progress towards the goals that they care about. And in this case, potentially will be a couple of goals that are connected with, of course, revenue and ROI, but also many other goals that have to do more with, for example, the organic search, revenue, traffic, and bench visibility, benchmark versus from a product line or a service area that is critical for the brand or the marketing team is very interested to push forward and prioritize in the next 6 months because a big release was made lately, right? And then, of course, from a technical standpoint, if we know that we have had many issues regarding crawlability or indexability configuration that was holding back the rankings of a very important area of the website, these are metrics that we want to monitor and potentially let the head of SEO know about how it is advancing over time. And it's something that the head of SEO would actually care a lot to see, not necessarily the marketing manager or the product manager, right? But the head of SEO will.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is important here is to share the ROI in terms of what has been the advancement towards the goal. So in this case, no benchmark is necessary, but yes, for example, the evolution over time. Yeah, look, before we had this indexability rate of our key pages or key categories, and now we have evolved and have improved in this percentage, but we know that the goal is to have 100% of all of our top level categories or second levels or up to third level facets index, and we're not yet yet there, right? So this type of evolution over time is also quite handy to understand if we are achieving and evolving as expected towards what we want in terms of goals, whatever they are, right? Whether they are technical, business oriented, traffic oriented, whatever is meaningful for the person that we're reporting to.
Yeah, completely agree. And I mean, there's something that I've experienced a lot working agency side for the last 6.5 years or so. Often a C-suite individual wants a one-pager. They want to just know, okay, what have I put in and what am I getting out of it? Whereas a technical marketing department head of SEO, like you're saying, marketing manager, they don't just want to see kind of what we've done. They want to see the results out of it, but also how those results and what we've done are helping to achieve their objectives, because the chances are these people are probably then having to go and take your report away, put their own reports together, and then present that back to their internal stakeholders and kind of showing the value that way too. So I think it's super important that we're thinking about the bigger picture when we're putting SEO reports. It's not just necessarily the person who you're reporting to, but it's also the bigger picture as well.
Yeah, 100%. That is why it's important that our SEO report is well structured in a way that is very easy to communicate. In most cases, of course, we really want to ensure as much as possible that we're able to present the results, right? So we can control communication and the storytelling around what we present. But if in case that is not doable, which will end up happening from time to time, I also highly advise that we avoid doing what unfortunately a few of us tend to do also in SEO because of resources and time restrictions, of like rely completely on KPIs that are generated by default by SEO tools, and create a one-pager type of dashboard that clients or decision makers can check. I mean, dashboards and these sort of KPIs or metrics that we want to monitor are super handy to check on real time for us, to monitor that things are evolving as expected, but not to communicate what we really need to decision makers, because pretty much these dashboards will only allow us to fulfill some of the needs that SEO reports will we want our SEO reports to achieve, right? Like SEO reports needs to communicate what has been achieved versus what was expected, and monetize these reports that are generated by default. Done. We need to explain the why. Why are these the results achieved so far? What has been the reason? What is holding us back? Or what is helping us to achieve results faster than we expected, right?
Yeah.
To rather than maximize or to change what we have been doing. And then how are the results going to be kept or improved to achieve goals, right? And unfortunately, if we just send a report, a one-pager that you mentioned before, like a lot of these questions won't be able to answer. But on the other hand, I also see the point that especially many decision makers don't have time to go through huge reports. Also, we don't have the time to allocate to create very long reports of dozens of pages every time. So what I highly advise here is that we design our reports structure to pretty much feature in a single page or a slide the evolution towards each KPI, right? And each page will show what is the goal, what is the final goal, the percentage of a metric that we want to achieve by a specific date, and then we explain pretty much with a heading like a descriptive KPI progress summarizing the evolution so far, Then we explain why the result is the one it is, like without description, explanation, worded explanation, and a relevant, very reflective KPI chart that we should feature. And then the resolution, which is like pretty much how to achieve the expected goal. Then should we continue doing what we have doing so far or not? And this pretty much for every KPI. So it's a page for every meaningful KPI. Pretty much the decision makers, they will care about a couple, right?
Yeah.
They don't need anymore. And then you have an executive summary that in case they don't want to go through every page, even if you have 3 of them, they don't need to go like a detail every page, because you have an executive summary where you pretty much summarize everything at a very high level in a single page, right? And you provide your conclusions. And then if they have questions, if they want to hear, they want to see more at a much higher level of granularity, then they have each page explaining
deep dive into the data.
So this is how it is. And then of course, if we're talking about not decision makers necessarily, but stakeholders of other areas, if you're an agency and this is for the head of SEO or the director of technical SEO or whatever, and they might want even to dig deeper into data, you can even link, and that is the beauty now that we have web slides and Google Docs and Google Sheets. You can link from there to your project management tasks where everything is much more specifically explained, and where they can even follow up with the progress, where there's like all the back and forth of the conversation, so they can see even more. So you don't need to include it all there, right? You can link out too, and you can have also a data appendix if you need, or a link to the dashboard in case they want to validate the data for themselves and play with the data. That is great, but again, you don't need to include all the data there. There is only a summary, a very high level summary with a screenshot of the actual graph that will explain easily where you are versus the objective.
Definitely. So let's talk a little bit about transparency then. So you've got all of this data, you've got your structure, you know exactly kind of what you're going to be delivering. One thing that I see a lot of in SEO, and this is across the board, agency side, in-house, is a bit of a lack of transparency. People don't always like to talk about the bad. They love to talk about the good. They love to make it super fluffy. It's significantly improved traffic, or we've seen increased, keyword rankings and things like this. They love talking about the good stuff. But it's the bad stuff that people tend to struggle with reporting. So how important is that transparency when we're going back to stakeholders, whether, again, that's internal, whether that's client side? And what's the best way to deliver that bad news if things aren't quite going the way that we expected or that was planned?
So I truly believe that we are afraid of that transparency many times because we don't actually do a good work on communication in our SEO reporting. If we did a good work on communication, we wouldn't be so afraid, right? Because of course there should be accountability. Of course there should be trust, because if the clients don't trust our work, especially as external parties, and they cannot, you shouldn't, or like even try or at any point to try to, for example, cherry pick data or manipulate scale, or being consistent of what you deliver or not based on what working well and what is being achieved as you expect and what not, right? That will only be detrimental and in the long term for and you will lose the trust of your clients. So that is detrimental. And then on the other hand, I truly believe that we are afraid of many times deliver bad news because, of course, we are measured at the end of the day on goals achievement, right? So if we don't achieve the goal as we had initially specified 6 months ago or a year ago, oh my God, the client will be mad at me, and they will say that I'm not doing my job well. But not necessarily. If we do a good work communicating and documenting all what has happened, and also set the correct expectations at the beginning of the process, then this shouldn't be an issue. Why? Because, for example, we can show, okay, like at this point we had already said that we should be achieving an example, right? Like 50% year-over-year growth, right? But we are behind. We're in 39% or in 25%, even worse, right? So what do I say? Like, it will make me look bad. No, because you can show, and it's important that you show how you're at this point and not able to achieve the 50% because the release or the action plan that you had expected to be released on January was actually released just 2 months ago, right? And there was a delay of 3 months. And then because your top competitor also released a huge campaign, a collaboration with a huge brand that ended up making them to attract like a volume of links from every top media of the world. And at the end of the day, and a lot of freshness. And at the end of the day, they were able to get so many more rankings and traffic that they ended up having this increase that couldn't be expected, right? Or planned by you or anybody who didn't work there, that at the end of the day didn't make the benchmark to show the increase or the trend that you expected at this point versus them, right? So you're potentially still behind them rather than ahead of them in terms of market share. But if you explain it like this, the client shouldn't be mad because they should see that you have done your bit of work, that the issue has been of a technical constraint. If you document this well, and if you when it happened, you actually communicated this to the client, this shouldn't be also news to them. They should see, okay, remember 3 months ago when there was this release, and I mentioned that there should be consequences with delays of results. We haven't been able to achieve this because of that, because this release impacted this type of product pages or this type of category pages, which were like the main drivers of this growth. And because of that, we're a bit delay on results. What can we do? Well, the next release that is set to happen in 3 months, if we are able to release the next one, we should be able to catch up in 4 months times, right? So let's better try to move faster than we had said rather than slower, because when we do it slower, take a look, we are not able to achieve the results. And if we are not able to also implement in time the next activities, then let's update also the goals, right? Because you cannot expect us to achieve the goals that we had set them 6 months ago, when we expected all the type of progress and implementation pace, and we are not getting it, right? And then on the other hand, in terms of benchmark and comparison versus competitors, what is so super important is when we sell the SEO process and start the SEO process, we explain this well and word this well. Look, we will be moving this and doing this, and we expect that it moves the needle in this way. But of course, the market is not static. Google will launch updates. Our competitors will launch stuff. And if our competitors are moving faster than we are, then we cannot expect to overcome them as we want, right? So this is super critical that we communicate it on time. And again, if we do it on time, the client shouldn't be mad because 3 months after, or 4 months, or 6 months after, the results are not the ones that we had initially set, right? So again, great communication, fluid communication, timely communication, and explaining the context around good and bad results shouldn't be detrimental, right? It should only show that we are professionals in this area, that we do our work, that we are on top of things. And if things are not evolving as expected, we provide alternatives, as long as we explain the reason and the reason is reasonable, and then we provide alternatives to change the situation. It shouldn't be detrimental.
Yeah. And you mentioned something really interesting there about the goal setting and about maybe changing how you're setting those goals based on your competitors, or based on kind of the things that you have achieved so far, what maybe you haven't been able to achieve because of barriers that have been put in place or other external factors. So let's talk a little bit about that in terms of if goals are changing, because for businesses over time, obviously SEO is a long-term strategy. A business's goals aren't necessarily going to be the same in year 1 as what they are in year 2, in year 3, in year 4. how do you change the reporting based on that? Is it just a matter of switching some KPIs and metrics out, or do we need to completely refocus that report?
Yeah, well, many times if the goals actually change, then a few of the pages, entire pages, or even the whole report will change, right? Because remember that our report will reflect pretty much the goals that we want to achieve. So if the goal change, the KPIs will likely change, and what we include to show the KPIs evolution toward the goal will also change, right? So it all depends if the goals stay the same or they change over time, depending on how our market changes, or how we are able to execute and achieve already initial progress, or develop the process versus our competitors, etc. Right? But in most cases, so for example, I have a client right now in a certain area, an industry that changed quite a bit after an update last year. So for example, there were many more video carousels being included, many more image results being included at the top of search result pages above the fold. So many of the queries that we were targeting, very broad queries in their industry, that they were totally capable to actually target and rank well for, because they are actually an authority in their field. But they were after that, we realized that this shouldn't be actually such a huge targets already anymore for us, because the type of click-through rate that we could expect from them, even if we rank in the first organic position, even if we leverage those sort of features and we were included in the carousel and in the image pack or whatever, even like that, the type of click-through rate will never be the same as the one that they did before, because of the update on sort of features and the display, right? So, and it was completely natural and reasonable for us to change a little bit the priority and say, okay, we will continue to target these queries, but we won't be over relying as we did as much before, because this ranking first for these queries or at the top won't end up generating the type of traffic that we expect anymore. Things have changed. So what do we do? What do we target? What do we focus on that makes sense for the brand, that makes sense for marketing efforts from a conversion standpoint, that is still aligned to what they want in terms of traffic and conversions, and that we can achieve now or develop now if we reallocate a little bit of the efforts and the resources that we were focusing on this particular pages that will target these broader queries, right? So it was normal, it was natural. We started like an additional let's say activity line with different type of pages, different type of more granular queries, connected, meaningful, but different. And of course, there was an additional, let's say, project line that was set, and for that we also had additional KPIs, specific goals, etc. So a new page pretty much on the SEO reporting deck was needed for that, right? And then of course the goals values were updated also for the old queries and the old pages, ranking for the broader terms, when we realized that it didn't make sense anymore to be over focusing on them, because there was no way for us that we will be able to achieve the type of traffic, conversions, and revenue goals that we expected from them.
Yeah, and that's something I see a lot in reporting as well, in that it just goes a bit stale. Things just become out of date, like people reporting on things that actually we don't care about anymore, because things like our business objectives have changed, or our goals have changed, or even the point of contact's changed perhaps. So talking about that, what happens when we're reporting back to people who don't really have an idea about SEO? They don't really know what we've been doing. Maybe they're a new contact if you work in agency side and it's a new marketing manager that's just taken on a campaign, or something like that. Is it just about communication, or is there something we can be specifically doing in reporting that's going to make it a lot easier for them?
Yeah, I truly believe that for these people that we won't be on top of things necessarily, but they will want, like, I don't know, quarterly type of information, right? Every quarter, so they want to have like an overview of things. What is important is that at the beginning of the SEO process, we understand the cadence, the frequency that they will need the SEO report on one hand, and then on the other hand, what are the goals again that they actually care about, and based on that, we can craft a SEO report that will be able to communicate what they actually want and need to know at that point in a presentation, or with a type of presentation that will better reflect the frequency, right? So it's for example, it doesn't make any sense that we present to them this ranking evolution on a daily basis for top targeted queries, right? It doesn't make sense. So if what they actually care about is about the evolution of our share of voice again for certain type of queries connected with a certain type of service line or product line that they are the directors of or in charge of, perfect. We know that every quarter we will generate a report reflecting pretty much the evolution in terms of share of voice versus top competitors, and then organizers traffic evolution that of course needs to be positive ideally, and then potentially the revenue and the ROI of this particular area just for them, and it will be every quarter, and that's it, and it will show the evolution per quarter, and then potentially so they understand if there's seasonality, and they see the actual meaningful gap and evolution over time, and then they can see if it is as we had said at that point, if as it was expected, right? So I think that what we tend to do too much many times is to include too many metrics that they won't understand, that they don't care about, and this will generate even more questions than provide them answer, and they will only be, let's say, negatively impressed by our inability to
frustrated.
Frustrated indeed, and of course this will be detrimental at the end of the day. This will they take trust from us, etc. So let's keep it simple, right? Like, let's not over focus on the technicalities if these are not technical decision makers, and let's just highlight. And the best way to set this is just to ask at the beginning of the SEO process, ask, what do you want me to include? What are the goals that you actually care about? What do you want me to include in your in the SEO report accordingly? Why, right? And what are the questions that you want to answer from the goals, progress or evolution? And based on that, we create a report, and we say, look, the report that I will be sending to you every quarter will look like this. Do you understand it? I will add commentary explaining what has happened, why the result is as it is there, and what we can do, how we can move forward to achieve the goal in case we're not evolving as expected, or what we should keep, right? And that's it. And as long as there is an agreement and you clarify beforehand, there shouldn't be any issue later on. Of course, there might be some minor doubts, but they shouldn't be like shocked to see something that they don't understand at all, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that's really common in terms of maybe a mistake that a lot of businesses are making with their reporting, in that it's just a blanket template. And all of the reports are the same, whether that's agency side, again, whether that's in-house or kind of reporting back to internal stakeholders. They just have exactly the same metrics that they're reporting on, or exactly the same kind of insights and recommendations, and nothing's really bespoke. And that's really where the communication aspect comes in, to say, what do you want to see? How can I show you the value in what we're doing? And how is this going to help achieve your goals? And then provide the report based on that.
Yeah, indeed, 100%, 100%. I mean, if you think about it, it's very reasonable at the end of the day. We shouldn't over obsess with technicalities or about featuring it all, including it all, because it will only add noise. Or actually, and there's another, I think, beautiful point to make too, using certain type of graphics that makes it so much more complex to understand evolution in a meaningful way. I think that many times we over obsess about making something beautiful, but it is
trying to make it look pretty.
Indeed, but many times I have seen, like for example, like graphs that are like historical lines that show the progress over time, like literally just a number showing if it has improved or not versus the previous period, will have made a much better work explaining the evolution, if it is as we expected or not. That is what So every time that we include a chart, we should ask, is it difficult to answer the question that I need to? Is it difficult to tell if I am evolving as I am expected at this point or not? Because many times we obsess about making it pretty, and we many times also just copy paste too from a screenshot from the tools. And many times too, these are graphs that makes all of the sense for us who are technical, but doesn't make any sense for a decision maker who are not. So it's critical for us to take a little bit of time to avoid obsessing over making a graph or a chart pretty, and asking ourselves, will the decision maker be able to answer the question about this goal achievement? Is non-branded organic search traffic evolving 200% year over year as we had said over the goals at the beginning of the process at this point, or not? That's it. And where the data comes from, let's always add a data source to establish trust and avoid doubts too, and label chart elements clearly and directly to facilitate fast understanding too, right? So many times, again, we only copy paste, and the labels that are included in SEO tools are not necessarily that meaningful for them, but were added there for our analysis and to play with data, right? But these are not needed there. So again, like labeling too. I always am a fan of adding the questions to be answered with each KPI as a chart headline too, to facilitate storytelling. So for example, as the headline or as a title of each chart, ask rather than something like non-branded versus branded traffic evolution, say something like, what's the branded traffic share? Has it grown 20% after a year? Right? So the person reading this, even if we are not able to explain the chart or the SEO report, they will be able to understand what we want to communicate with the chart, right? The evolution of branded traffic share or non-branded traffic share year over year, and if it has grown 20% or not. And they should be able to answer that with that chart.
Definitely. I think that's so important to just take a step back sometimes when you're reporting, because as you say, we're in SEO all the time. We live for the tools, we live for the reporting and the implementation and the execution, but sometimes we just need to take that step back and kind of say, does it make sense to who we're trying to report it to? Will they actually care as well? I think that's a really important question. Do they care about this? What does it mean, and where do we go next? I think they're really key points when it comes to reporting.
Yeah, 100%. And this is why it is critical and fundamental to not try to add everything by default, right? And ask the person that we are going to provide or explain or communicate the report to, what do they care about? What are the goals that they want to keep the progress, the progress of the achievement of which goal, and based on that, we can select and we can make the decision of including certain KPIs evolution or not.
Definitely. So with SEO being a long-term strategy, can you cause yourself more problems by reporting too frequently? So whether that's daily or weekly or fortnightly, could you end up tripping yourself up because of that and causing more problems?
Oh my God, yes. Over communication, that is definitely a thing too. And you know what? Actually, one of the things that I presented about this topic some time ago at the Women in Tech SEO conference a few months ago. And I actually had a slide just about this, right? It's like something that we don't necessarily think about much, but is critical, is that we set the correct expectation and educate a little bit also, especially non-technical decision makers, about what is reasonable to expect in terms of frequency of reporting, because they will tell you, oh, daily, right? If they could, they will. Some money of
they definitely would.
They will make you to send them reports like even daily if they could, right? Of course they wouldn't read it, but they will make you anyway. But it is critical here that we do then a good job evangelizing and educating, telling them, look, if you're the C-level person, you will tend to like to see this quarterly, for example, when they usually do the assessment of department's evolution or area evolution. If it is the head of the department, monthly, very likely. But if they tell you, I want this every 2 weeks, or I want this weekly, and it's important to explain that there's no point on doing weekly reports if there won't be meaningful changes during this period of time due to the SEO nature that is long term, and then also the frequency of releases. How and why would you expect to see impacts or important impacts or meaningful changes of trends every week if you are releasing stuff every month or every 2 weeks? It doesn't make sense,
Exactly.
right? So again, the pace of your reporting should reflect the pace of implementation too.
Yeah, completely. Because I think you just end up getting yourself into a bit of a hole where you've got so many eyes on you that you end up spending more time on reporting than you do on the implementation, which then impacts your reporting because you're not achieving anything.
Yeah,
so it just
100%.
ends up being a big circle.
And it's normal. It's normal, of course, that we explain this, that we inform about this, and we say, okay, it doesn't make any sense to send you weekly reports because nothing meaningful will be achieved. You will only be like mad at me potentially for not achieving more, and it will be a waste of time. Let's have a call every month, and if it is a decision maker, right, or if it is a stakeholder, let's have a call every 2 weeks, because your sprints are of 2 weeks time, things like that. So it's critical that we set the pace and make it like set the expectations about timing, not only of goals achievement, but also what is reasonable in terms of communication and SEO reporting, depending on when or how often do we expect results to change in a impactful way.
Definitely, 100% agree. Aleyda, that is all of the questions that we have for today. I don't know if you've got any tips or tricks or anything else on SEO reporting that you'd like to cover off for our listeners.
Yes, so maybe a few questions that I will ask you to make to yourself whenever you're like crafting your reporting. I will tell you to ask every time when you're including or you're informing about the evolution of a goal, right? Because this should be it. It's like, is this metric actually informing about the evolution of a goal that this person actually cares about? Yes or not? If it doesn't, then don't add it. And then add those KPIs that would actually inform the evolution towards goal that the person that you will inform about actually cares of. And then what is important is that you leverage storytelling principles to ensure that you're communicating each one of these KPIs evolution in a correct way. What happened? Why did it happen? How to proceed for each one of the KPIs that you will be including. Don't expect to do this just by generating the data of a dashboard, exporting data of a dashboard, or even exporting from an SEO tool that has a reporting feature, right? Like these are things that you need to personalize, that you need to explain, that you need to comment on, ideally also present. So of course, because of this too, I don't expect that you do this every week. It's not reasonable. So again, setting correctly the expectations right at the beginning, choosing the right KPIs based on what the decision makers care about, and setting also the expectations of when it makes sense to present and do the reporting, and what they should expect in terms of the report. So you can show an example at the beginning to clarify any doubts. So later on, even if at some point you cannot present the report yourself and just send it with a little bit of commentary, you don't get all of these questions every single time, right? So it's important that you set the base for a good SEO reporting. Then on the other hand, it is critical and fundamental that you confirm and you establish and validate well with decision makers that where you are going to get the KPIs, the data, or the metrics that you are going to use for your calculations, right? So this has happened to me too. For example, I have had a client that they say, okay, my boss is obsessed to use these tools metrics. And I'm like, but literally, are these tool metrics something that this person has been relying a lot on because it's what they are used to, or because they actually care about what they reflect? So, for example, obsessing over domain authority or any of these proprietary metrics of third-party tools. Let's talk with the decision maker and to validate and clarify and see what actually they want from this metric that is a third party, and we cannot over rely, unfortunately, because it is a metric that is not necessarily accurate on what they want to assess, and is it's very difficult to actually use, because at the end of the day, a third party generated by a third party tool is doesn't reflect necessarily directly what we do. So it is important to clarify that and evangelize and re-educate many times and say, oh, what you actually care about are, for example, the level of market share that we have with competitors, and this is the metric that they use. If taking a look at, I don't know, the authority of the domains of all of us versus our top players, things like that, right? Many times we will end up understanding this, that they were using that because it was the easiest way for them, but we can find all the more accurate ways to measure what they need, what they want, and these are metrics that will be, let's say, much more meaningful for us, that will better reflect our work too. And then also we need to understand many times, and potentially also educate our clients around that. Many times they say, oh, but how accurate is this? Like the data is not complete, right? There's a lack of data here, etc., etc. So many times we will need to have a balance of this, and do a balance work regarding the KPIs will actually allow you to answer the goals evolution on one hand. Then we need to at least establish a couple of methods to gather the same data for consistency check, and then even if we want 100% accuracy, this is not realistic, and what we need to balance is also precision, right? Accuracy means that the data is 100% correct. Many times, even Google Analytics, right? Like all the data, if your website is too big, it won't be there, and there will be a sort of like sampling going on, right? So what you need to ensure in this case is precision, because precision means that the data is consistent, right? So again, you need to do a good work communicating this to the client so they don't over obsess about certain data sources, certain metrics, etc., etc. And what you need to ensure is that the metrics that you communicate with, they are happy with it, they know where they come from, that you have a couple of data sources that you have availability to use them and gather them, so you don't end up like running into midway your process and see that you're not capable to obtain them anymore, right? So again, a balanced work here is important to, let's say, to a little bit to cover your back, just in case.
Amazing. Aleyda, thank you so much for all of your insights today on SEO reporting. It's been incredible. Again, it's been so much fun. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that this is usually a very overlooked topic because it's not very sexy to talk about it. But as we have seen, it's very well needed. It's fundamental and can impact a lot the evolution of our SEO processes and the buy-in that we get. And it can be the difference also between getting fired or even a raise or even more support or budget too. So yeah.
Definitely. And one thing you were mentioning quite a lot throughout as well, Aleyda, communication, most important.
Yeah, 100%. Communication in a way that actually reflects what we need, rather than just trying to make our clients happy, right? Many times, unfortunately, we believe that telling the client what they want to hear is good communication, and it's not. Sometimes we need to communicate things that, unfortunately, it's not what they expect, but it's important that we do it, and it's better to do it sooner than later.
Definitely. Well, Aleyda, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all of our listeners for hopping onto the spaces. Keep an eye on our socials for our next one. Aleyda, thanks again.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. I had a wonderful time, Sophie. You're an amazing host, and we're looking forward also to participate much more in the future if you want to. Thank you very much.
Definitely.
It was amazing.
Thanks so much. Speak to you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.